So this is where the magic's gonna happen. Alright guys, so I was able to get the steering blister cleaned up. I did end up welding it on the outside of the hood where it meets the hood, ground it down, and then just gave it a quick sanding. So I was able to clamp it onto the side of the car on the edge of the cowl, and I got it mounted onto the car so I could see what the finished product is going to look like. Now the hood's going to need a little bit of work. I got a couple little spots popping through there. For the most part, I think the hood's in pretty good shape. But again, I mean, it's not as nice as the rest of the metal on the car, but it's in pretty good shape. So I'm going to move on now to the headlight mounts. As I was saying before, I have one bolt that's in here now, currently just holding them in place. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill obviously from the outside in, and then I have access in these areas on both sides of the frame. I'm not going to fill this in. I'm going to leave these the way they are. So I'll always have access to them if I need to remove them for whatever reason. So I'm at least going to get the holes drilled. I got 4 holes to drill, 2 on the driver's, 2 on the passenger side. I'm going to get those mounted. I have a set of headlights on the way coming from California. They're a set of 6 to 6.5 inch old chrome. Oh boy, Dietz. I think they're Dietz headlights. They're just an aftermarket, like an accessory headlight. Could even be a General Motors headlight. I'm not entirely sure, but I know they're 6 to 6.5. That's what these ones are. Anything larger than that, I think on a stanchion, which these are headlight stanchions. I think anything larger than that size headlight is just too big. But I think the car's going to look great with the headlights that are on the way. So onto the headlight stanchions.
Shout out to the world so they know my sweet baby loves me so. She got me going, yeah, she turns me on. And she loves me, yeah, she loves me. And it blows my mind. Yeah, it blows my mind. She's my lover.
Apparently, when I went to the store yesterday, I bought all the lock washers I needed, flat washers, the bolts, and no nuts. Alright, so the headlight stanchions are all mounted, everything's bolted in and done. I'm just waiting on the set of headlights that I ordered from a guy out in California. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mount these old F1 shock mounts. These came on the car. This is a really popular modification that guys used back in the day when they changed from lever shocks to airplane style shocks, that's what we run currently in our cars nowadays, but back in the day they were known as airplane shocks. These are F1 front one mounts from a 48 to a 52 Ford pickup, and again these came on the car, so I want to reuse them. Even if they didn't come on the car, I would be putting on something similar to this. So this was one of the original bolt holes from the shocks. The front end was out forwards in front of the car, in front of the cross member. So the shock mounts, one bolt hole was here and the other one is actually underneath the headlight stanchion now. So what I decided to do was to retain the one bolt. Originally what I was going to do was run the shock mount like this and use one of the taller Columbus shocks, which I have here. So I was going to run one of these shocks, and they actually fit perfectly in this setup with the bolt down on the wishbone. However, once I really started looking at the height of these shocks, so what you want to do is you want to try to when you're mounting your shocks, you want to be mid-stroke, so you compress it and you make a measurement at your shortest length, and then you extend it and make a measurement at your extended length, at the longest length or the tallest. Because the height of this shock, this is designed as a rear shock, the car was going to ride at the very bottom of the stroke, and I only had about an inch or so, inch and a half of travel. It's just not enough. I had another set of shocks which I was originally planning on running, which is a Columbus shock. So this is a vintage Velvet Ride. This is all NOS that I got from a buddy of mine. The difference between this shock, this is supposed to be a front shock. That's mid-stroke right there. And I already made my measurements and figured out in the middle where it needed to be. However, if you can see, it clearly doesn't match up with where the height of the mount is now. So what I need to do is either need to cut this and shorten it, or I could just reconfigure the way I'm going to mount it. And that's what I'm going to do. So instead of running the lower bolt hole, the lower mount hole down in this bolt, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the top hole in that. And it's actually going to work out really good because it's going to kind of split. Trying not to get in your way. Let me see the bolt here. So what it's going to do is, it's actually going to be nice. It's going to be nice and clean. It's directly in the center underneath the headlight stanchion. And if I were to take a measurement of this, I'm going to heat and bend this shock mount, and it's going to come up, and it's essentially going to be exactly where it needs to be. I don't think I'm going to have to do anything besides heat and bend this. Kind of figure out where I want it. I'm going to snug this down. I'm going to make my mark where my hole needs to be for this front hole. And then I'm just going to heat and bend this thing. I'm going to get a piece of wire, and I'm going to recreate the bend that I need out of a piece of wire, so then I can recreate it when I'm heating this up on the table. I'm going to get my layout where I need it to be, and then I'm going to grab both of these shock mounts and get these heated and bent, and then get the front shocks mounted on the car, and the next I'm going to do is the rear shocks. So let's do that now. Well, I actually think I need to space these out a little bit. You can see where it's really rubbing on the frame. Grab a couple of washers. Just to create a spacer. So I'll make spacers in my bandsaw after, but this just in the effort to keep things moving. Here we go. It's like a 3/8 inch spacer, I'd say, roughly. Alright. So now I'm going to grab a piece of wire or a thin piece of round rod. Alright, so like that. It needs to be bent to there. So that's more or less what I'm looking to do, if you can see that. Something like that. It may end up sweeping up a little faster and then being straighter. I'll probably do it something more like that. So it kind of follows just the back side of this headlight mount a little closer. I think that's about what I need. So I'm going to snip this off. Actually, no, I'll leave it. I'm going to make a mark on my table so I know what I need. Kind of things cleaned up a little bit. Alright, going to get my torch set up. It may work out for the passenger side. I'm gonna set it on the passenger side and see. Yeah, it's gotta go further. I have to heat it more. I still got about 10 or 15 degrees to go. I mean, it did work out that it kind of bent out a little bit, but the problem is I have to replicate it on the next one. So we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna heat it this way and bend it down. Actually, I think I'll just make a mark. To roughly what I need it to be. And now I'll take that and see how close I came. Probably not close enough. But that's how hot rodding goes. Sometimes. Other times you just get lucky. Well, I think I did pretty good. Looks good to me. So you can see it's pretty much lined straight up with the mark that I made. It's a little bit shorter, but you know, there's nothing I can really do about that unless I want to heat the hell out of it and stretch it, which I didn't want to do. So, I'm going to set this one to the side and do number 2, which is here. And I just have to heat it the same. I basically got to heat it right here and just bend it up. But this one, if it goes on the passenger side, this one bends this way. So to the table. I need this one to bend away from the table. It's going to bend this way. I mean, I can always heat and bend that back if I have to, if I can't get them close, but I'm at least going to attempt to tweak this one this way just a touch. Just try to build it the way they would have built it, you know? That's all I'm trying to do. I'm using the parts that they use. Hey everyone, it's Mike at This Old Hot Rod up here in Massachusetts, and just gonna really trying to keep this train rolling. So I'm out in the garage. It is Tuesday. Last night I finished up working on a few things on the car. My battery died on my camera and it died on my cell phone. That's kind of one of the struggles. It's cold in here this afternoon. It's kind of one of the struggles with always wanting to videotape and needing to videotape. I had a fully charged battery on my camera, but it still died. You know, anyways, it just makes it a little tough. It's just an extra little hurdle to get over each time you're out working on the car. So I was able to get the headlight stanchions mounted yesterday. I was able to get the front shock mounts heated and bent. I think I'm going to do a little bit of tweaking to them. They're a little vertical. I'm kind of lean them backwards a little bit because with the rake of the car goes like this. When I bent them 90 degrees, so they actually are kind of pointing forwards a little bit. I want to kind of heat them and roll them back a little bit more to get like the shock sitting more vertical instead of leaning forwards towards the axle. That has to be a little modification that I have to do. So I got the front shocks mounted with the shock mounts, and then also got the rear shocks mounted. I used the lower shock mounts that were on the car, part of the original suspension that came on the car. It was originally 1955 to 1956 or 57 Chevy, or Impala, something like that, Bel Air or an Impala. So I used the lower shock mounts that were on the car, and I had a set of weld-on mounts that kind of like a weld-on stud mount. Of course it won't open, but anyways, kind of hard to do with one hand. So I had these, I'm sorry, they weren't weld-on, they were stud mount shock mounts. So what I ended up doing was I drilled a hole in the rear cross member, which is a big 4-inch round tube. It's like 1/8 wall, 4-inch tube. I just drilled a hole and mounted these. There were holes, so you can see down here. Let me see. Grab a light. You can see down low on the car of the mount. There's a stud mount off the back of the 2-link. I have a set of NOS Columbus rear shocks on the car. The angle may be a little steep for some. I get it. It may not be ideal in some situation. I bumped my camera and it shut off. So as I was saying, if you look closely, you can see where the shocks were mounted, which is this hole. This car had really large coilover shocks on top of the coils that are in the car, the coil springs. Those coil springs are welded to the underside of the frame rail. So that's how they did it back in the day. That's how a lot of guys did it back in the day. I do not know how this car is going to ride. And I won't know how the car is going to ride until I actually drive it. So I won't know what changes that need to be made until that day. So that being said, I moved the shock bolts of the top mounts inbound 5 inches, almost 6 inches, and tried to decrease the height. I tried to decrease the angle of the shock. However, that was a shock that I had and wanted to run, and to keep the shock in the middle of the stroke or just above the middle of the stroke, that's where it needed to be. What I did was I figured out the middle of the shock stroke. I compressed it all the way in and then extended the shock completely out. I then divided that in half, and that gave me my middle stroke. So I compressed the shock down to the very middle point, and then I extended it 1 inch, because the car right now is sitting empty. It has no fuel in it, no floors, no seat, no people. So I extended the shock up 1 inch, and that was the spot where I had to make my mount. What else I could have done, I suppose, is I could have made more of a tower up here and mounted the shock up there, so it could have been a little bit more vertical, but I was going to run into the frame rail, and I didn't want to compress the shock way down and have the car riding way down in the shock stroke. It only had a couple inches of travel, so I'd rather angle it a little bit more but have some extra travel. That was my train of thought. So in the future, if this setup doesn't work, I can just weld on some tabs underneath the rear axle housings on the tubes and mount my shocks a little more vertical. But again, I don't know how this car is going to handle. I don't know how it's going to drive down the road. This car was built in '62, and from what information I got, the car was driven up until the early '80s. So either late '70s or early '80s. So the car was at least on the road for a good 15 years, if not more. and it was never changed, so I have to assume it rode good enough for those guys. And I mean, I'm not looking to be riding in a Cadillac. If I was, I wouldn't be building a hot rod. So I'm expecting it to maybe have a little bit of a rough ride. But again, I won't know. I'm not going to know what the car is going to drive like until I'm actually driving it. So again, please don't feel the need to post all the negative comments you want to post about the angle of the shocks and what reason you need certain angles of the shocks and this and that. I know, I get it, but that's not the way the car was set up back in the day. I'm trying to recreate the car as close to what I can with the parts that I have, and those are the shocks that I wanted to run. They were a certain length, and that's the position the shocks need to be in order to run them. Like I said, in the future, if I need to change it, I'll change it. So we'll just see. And it's a lot better than what it was. So is it perfect? Maybe not. Is it an improvement to what it was? Maybe, hopefully, but I'm not going to know until I drive it. So that being said, I'm moving on to the next item. My next item is fabricating up some brackets. There's just some angle iron to mount the radiator and the grill shell to the front of the car. I got my hood side, driver's side, hood side mocked up. I'll know the angle and the distance of the grill shell to the hood, and then what I'll do is I'll get the driver's side set, and then I'll work on the passenger side. I have it at this point, it's centered on the car. What I did was I took a metal ruler, I clamped it to the frame rail. I figured I have 30 inches here and 5 here, so I have a 25-inch span. I measured across the middle, 12.5, made my mark, centered my grill shell, then I made measurements on either side. I got it so the grill shell is centered on the car. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my tabs welded onto the side of the grill shell. So what my plans are is I'm going to mount it in a few different locations. I'm going to affix the radiator and the grill shell to the frame on 4 points, not including the rods. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 2 brackets, I'm going to weld it to the side of the radiator. This is a metal frame that goes around the radiator itself. I'm going to weld the bracket on either side of that radiator. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill 2 holes. I'm going to get bolts, 4 bolts, and I'm going to cut the heads off the bolts. And I'm going to weld them to the front of the front cross member. It's the exact opposite of what Brad did, and I'll show you what I mean by that. This is the front cross member that was on the car that I took off of the car. On the back side of it, if you can see it, are 4 studs with the nuts on them. This is what held the radiator from the back side. So from the back side, the radiator was held on like this. So what I'm going to do is basically do what Brad did, except in reverse. They're going to be facing forwards. What I may do is just drill the hole and throw some bolts in from the back side, and then weld them on the outside. And then in the future, when the car gets taken apart, I'll lift the frame and the body up, and I'll be able to weld on the back side also. So it'll be a weld on the back and a weld on the front, instead of just relying on a weld on the front of the car, on the front of the cross member. So, but I can't do that until I get it actually built and set up and mocked up and everything the way it needs to be. Maybe I won't need the lower mounts, and if that's the case, then maybe I'll just cut those off. But I'm kind of thinking it wouldn't be a bad idea. But again, we'll see what happens when the time comes. I gotta get the other 2 mounts first and see how rigid it is and make sure it's sturdy. And if it's sturdy enough, then I'll just leave it the way it is. Like I said, I'm gonna get these couple pieces of angle iron cleaned up, get them tacked and welded onto the side of the radiator frame, and then get my holes drilled and get this thing mounted onto the car. Because tomorrow, I want to roll this thing out of the garage. I got a set of wheels that were powder coated. that I just picked up today, and I had some tires in the shop that I had purchased for my 29 sedan. I bought a set of 750/16 rears, but unfortunately I wasn't able to run them because they were too big for the car and they hit the body of the car if I ran them without spacers. If I put spacers on it and space them out a little bit, I could probably run them. But this car is kind of deserving of a nice new set of Firestone 750s, white walls, so that's what's going on it. The wheels are powder coated black, and so basically the wheels at this point are kind of an answer to the problem of not having a set of chrome reversed wheels for the back. I've been looking, I just haven't found a set. I want something that matches the front, you know, like condition wise, but again, I just haven't found a set. They'll come up, I'll find a set eventually, but for the time being, these cars in this era look really good with a black wheel with a white wall, with no caps or anything, just a bare black wheel. So I want to kind of go with that. And in the future, if I can find a set of chrome reversed that will bolt on, whether it's a Ford style wheel that I have to run an adapter, or if it's a Chevy wheel that I can put a cover on, then I'll happily go that route. But until I can find a set, then I'm just going to run these wheels and tires. And again, I'll be more than happy to do so because it still fits the look that I'm going for, which is a big and little, a wide white with a black steel wheel. It's just timeless. It's really a timeless wheel combination. So super looking forward to that. So I'm hopefully gonna roll this thing out of the garage tomorrow, completely mocked up, minus the interior. It's steering, no brakes, because that won't come for a while. But you know, no interior, but it's gonna be rolling on all four. The body panels are all on. It's gonna be in paint, and the motor transmission are in. So it's all the shocks are on. So it's gonna be a pretty big deal. I'm hoping I can get my headlights too. If I can get my headlights, I got headlights on the way, which are an old chrome 6-inch headlight. The thing is just basically going to look like what it's going to spend the rest of its life, at least while I own it. It's going to look like that, minus the hood sides being painted. A lot of people looking forward to it too. So I'm going to get to work on these things, and I'll show you what I'm going to do when I get these cleaned up and trying to get them tacked onto the car. Alright, so I got these little tabs cut off, or cut out. Started cleaning up the outsides. I'm going to clean up the insides real fast. What I ended up doing is I had some 1-inch by 1/4-inch flat stock, just bar stock. And what I need to do, as you can see on the edge of the radiator support, there's like these ribs, and the ribs are there for strength, I would imagine. But I can't just mount these tabs like this. I don't want to just mount them to just this thin sheet metal. So what I want to do is I'm going to clean these up a little bit. I'm actually going to mount these on. This radiator support. I'll be able to weld it on top. They stick out just a tiny bit where I could be able to weld it on this edge, and then that will kind of give me a better base to weld these tabs onto, as you can see, like that. So I made them just a little bit bigger than the actual tab. The tab is the height of the Model A cross member, so it's about 2.5 inches. As I set them on the cross member, just to make sure that I cut them the right height, I noticed that the cross member in the area that I'm going to be mounting them to, they're tapered. So if I were to just set this on the outside like this portion of the angle is actually they're pointing in. So what I had to do is, I already did this side. I put it in my vise and just closed the vise up a little bit to close up this angle. So I need it to be, instead of 90 degree, I probably need it to be in the vicinity of, like, let's say 80. So I got to go a little bit more on this one. You can see the little bit of an angle already that I'm trying to create. So I just need to close this in a little bit more so I can get the correct angle, so I can get everything welded up together. So I'm going to do that real quick and close up that angle on these pieces of angle iron. and then get the inside of these cleaned up real quick and start welding things together. So you can see the angle that I've bent it at. I mean, I could put an angle finder on it and figure out exactly where it's at, but we're building hot rods here. Backyard hot rod building. Just gotta eyeball it. Alright, I'm gonna go a little bit more on this one to match the other one and kind of see where I'm at. I may need to open it or close it up a little bit, I don't know. Alright, so those are pretty good. So I went a little too far. So if I went too far on one, it means I went too far on the other. I'll open these up just a little bit and then I'll get them welded onto the radiator support. How am I going to open them up? I don't know. Hammer? I'm going to get my earplugs because I have them handy. Oh yeah, I think I'm good. Yeah. Alright, so I'm gonna get these little 1" by 1/4 inch pieces ground down, cleaned up, so I get that mill scale off of them, and then get these welded to the radiator support. And then once I can get them welded to the radiator support, what I'll do is mount the radiator and put the grill shell back on, figure out exactly where they need to be height-wise and depth, figure out what the depth needs to be, because I want to set the radiator off of the front cross member like just a little bit, 1/8 of an inch or so, just enough where the fins won't be rubbing up against the cross member, but not so much that it's going to be extended out where I can't run my hood. So I'm going to get this cleaned up real quick and get to welding. Alright, let's get this thing set back on the car so I can figure out where my height needs to be and then get these things tack welded onto the car. Heavy ass radiator. So what I did was I took my little cut-off wheel and I actually just scored the front of the cross member before I sanded it. After I made my marks, I just scored it. So when I sanded the paint off, I still saw a mark, and I knew when I put it back on, I'd have it centered. That's where I'm at. I feel like it's just going to come up just a touch on this side. The problem is the lower radiator hose hole is actually hitting the axle, and that has to be modified in the future. I have to have it raised up like 1 inch. There we go. Alright, right there. That's where it's got to be. So I'll just make some marks. Make some marks where my cross member is. So I make sure I have clean metal. And then what I want to do, is take these tabs and figure out where they're going to go. So I'll make some marks on these tabs. There's 2 ribs on the outside of this radiator support, and I'm just going to mark it the center of this rib. This radiator has seen better days, but it's what I have, and when the time comes, I will send it to the radiator shop and have it rebuilt. So this is how I'm going to mount this little filler. This is kind of just filling in the space in this lower area. I'm going to mount that filler, and then I'm going to mount my tab like that over it. It's going to bridge the filler. I'm going to be able to weld right to this rib. I'm going to weld the filler to the radiator support all around it, and then I'll be able to weld this tab to the filler, and it'll just give me a lot more strength, I think. And like I said, it's just going to kind of, I think, be a stronger point of contact. I'm going to clean this up a little bit more though. I got to clean the inside, which I did not do yet. Alright, so I'm just going to put a few tacks on it for now. This is going to end up being flush. Actually, I can't just do tacks. I have to actually weld it, especially on the back side. So starting my weld on the actual thick steel, on the 1/4-inch steel, and I'm bringing it over to the sheet metal because I don't want to blow a hole through the sheet metal. But I want to make sure I get it nice and hot. Get a good weld. So far they look great. It's nice because I got some really nice metal to weld to, not just the sheet metal. I don't want to rely just on that sheet metal to hold the radiator. On a jet plane? Hi. Hi, you remember me? I'm Allie.
He doesn't remember me because he's been in the garage too much.
No, not enough. The car's not done yet. I won't be in the garage too much if the car isn't done. It means I'm not in the garage enough.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. What's up?
Don't forget to cook dinner.
Yeah. Taco Tuesday.
It's Wednesday.
Today's Monday.
Today's Tuesday.
Tuesday.
No.
You don't know your ass from your elbow.
That's because you said there was something in your butt.
What? Your butt? Yeah. Yeah, it's Tuesday.
Is it? I'm not used to it. Jesse threw me all off. Threw me off.
It's all in my routine.
Stop.
I guess.
I'm going to see Carlos.
Carlos? My arch nemesis. Carlos. I love you too, honey. Honey bunny. Isn't she
I forgot
great?
to tell you. What?
I said, isn't she great?
You said it.
remember it being that close. Could be wrong. Yeah, we got something going on here. So I need to make a measurement. Things aren't adding up. So from the bottom mount, I'm at 5 1/4 to 7 7/8. And over there, different. So, I gotta figure out why. It's gonna be fun. And I don't know why. Yeah, I'm talking like an inch. How's it going, everybody? It's Mike. I'm back out here in the garage. It is a Saturday morning, and I finally got the grill shell and the radiator mounted on the front of the car. It is temporary. You saw me welding the tabs onto the side of the radiator frame itself, and at that point I realized one of the tabs was a little off, but my camera died. So it's just, again, one of the typical struggles of a YouTuber. And with a new camera, I just went and bought a new camera without thinking that I should probably buy an extra battery with it. They didn't sell the batteries at the store that I bought the camera from, but I have since ordered 2 additional batteries with a separate charger. So that I'll be able to avoid this moving forward. So just the problem is it creates gaps in the video and the timeline. So yeah, so I'm just trying to avoid that. So it just forever evolving, like I think every other YouTuber out there. So I'll show you the tabs, how I ended up welding them on, and the position and the way it worked out, and what my thoughts are moving forwards with the additional mounts. So there's the tabs here. This is obviously the driver's side. Like I had said, I just have them tacked to the frame. It was just basically, the reason behind it was to get the grill shell and the radiator off the blocks so I could move the whole car as one. Just a couple of tacks, but you can see it's welded on all sides, plus the lower piece of metal that I welded to the radiator itself. I mean, it's solid to a point where, like I said, I can roll the car in and out of the garage. These lower mounts, which I had talked about before, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this tab on both sides, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move this tab up to here. I'm going to move it up to it's at the same height as the lower portion of the frame, and I'm going to build a bracket basically here off the radiator cell to this side of the frame rail. So I'll have a mounting point here and this mounting point here, so I know moving forward that I really shouldn't have any issues with it. So yeah, I got my headlights that I had mentioned. These headlights I purchased off a kid in California. Really nice. I mean, they are perfect the way they match the patina. They don't have any heavy pits, but you know, a few little nicks and scrapes here, but no dents, no dings. The lenses are good. They're just a perfect fit for the car, and you can see the shocks are mounted and everything. So yeah, the car really has come together pretty quick. So basically, what's next now that the radiator and grill shell are mounted to the frame? I obviously have to drill some holes and get it through bolted, but for the time being, just moving forward, just for mock-up reasons. For now, if I need to take it off, I know where it's got to be marked. I'll drill my holes before I take it off, so I can get my bolts in through the back of the cross member. I'll be able to just, you know, bolt it on and off. So when that time has to come, I'll have access to it that way. Once the firewall's finished, I will be able to start working on my pedals. And then once my pedals and masted cylinder and all that, you know, all the mechanical stuff right there underneath on the driver's side is done, I can maybe start working on my exhaust. I don't know if I should do my exhaust first or if I should just have the exhaust done after. I may send it out to a buddy of mine who does it. And then I can kind of get into some of the fun stuff, you know, like the detail stuff, like the fuel system and running the fuel line and running the brake lines and doing all that stuff. So yeah, it's coming together quick. I've taken a little bit of time off of the car because I've been, like I said in my last video, working at my girlfriend's a lot, and now since my girlfriend's is kind of wrapped up, my mom has stepped on board and she wants some stuff taken care of at her house, so you have to take care of mom. So I'll be starting some projects at my mom's house next. In between, I'm gonna get back on the 34 and get some of these things off my to-do list. Appreciate everybody following along. Thank you again as always. Please like, please comment, please share. I got my year in review from YouTube in email this morning, and it was very humbling. You know, I'm sure the YouTube, the way that they send these emails out, they probably build everybody up, but the numbers through my year in review, for me, I never expected, you know, I never expected the numbers that I saw. You know, 2.5 million minutes in views. I forget some of the numbers. I mean, like I said before, I'm nearing 4,000 subscribers, which is unthinkable. What YouTube in the email, it said how I'm killing it, you know, you're killing it and blah blah blah, and your viewers this, and they've shared your videos, you know, 1,200 and something times, and it's just really cool. Keep sharing my content, help me grow the channel. This 34 isn't the only project that I have. I have a few other cars, and the one that I started and didn't finish, which is a 29 sedan, a 29 Roadster. That's a beautiful car that I want to build for my girlfriend. It's a run and drive and banger at the moment. I think once I get the 34 done and finish up the sedan, I've got all the parts to build it. It's just time, and you guys motivate me by following along and just commenting, and it's pretty cool. So I finally started my own channel, and it's kind of taken off, and it's been just a great experience. So thank you again, everybody. I really appreciate it, and I'm gonna get to work, just keep checking things off my list. So thank you. I hope everybody's having a great week, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Take care. Bye bye.